Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to Total War Warhammer. So, we're on to the vampire counts, and these guys are a common faction in the ladder. They're like one of the most common ones out there right now. And this is because they've got a really interesting set of traits that we'll get to right now. So first of all, they've got different lords, and people only ever take one of them. First of all, you got the Master Necromancer, he's a pure caster, and we'll go through all of these things that all undead just have so we can get it out of the way really quickly here. First of all, they've got undead, which means that they do not rout, they're immune to terror, become unstable, and leadership is low. It will suffer from attrition when moving through territory not owned by the undead, which is campaign only. Next up, they got crumbling. If leadership is below 0, they deal damage to themselves, and it's very, very small amounts of damage. I do wish it was a little bit higher. Next up, you got Master of the Dead. This is his lore ability for necromancy. Or no, this is actually an augment for the Necromancer, I think. Yeah, this is a constant replenishment of HP. Next is Curse of Undeath. Greatly replenishes HP of combatants. This is whenever you cast a spell. Next up is Disintegrating, and this is severe damage to yourself if your leadership is at the Shattered level. So if your leadership is really low, you'll start disintegrating, which is really high damage very, very quickly. Curse of Years is their first spell. Minus 34 melee attack, minus 24% speed, plus 15 second ability charge. This is a fairly decent debuff. I don't think that the combination melee attack and melee speed speed is necessarily the best one, but you can use it to catch up to a unit that's trying to kite away and then immediately start mauling into them with their reduced melee attack. So that could be a decent hex if you need to catch up to some cluster of troops. I still don't particularly like that type of thing though. Next up is Gaze of Nagash. This is your typical assassination missile spell. Pretty effective, relatively cheap. I don't like it as much as Shem's Burning Gaze, but it is still pretty okay. Next is Invocation of Nihek. This is a raise. This replenishes the undead units that you've already got, basically. It's a fairly effective spell, and it's very good for keeping your general alive if necessary. Next up is Raise Dead. You create a unit of zombies in the area, and this is actually a very interesting spell. You can only use it twice per battle, but it's a free unit. Even though it's a fairly inexpensive unit, it's still just a unit that's popped up where normally it wouldn't be able to arise, and I do think that that's a very effective one. Venhel's Dance Macabre. This is the same as that Lore of Light one. I don't particularly like it. Affects one unit. Just not very good combo. Next up, Wind of Death. This is actually a very good vortex because it travels in a purely straight line and moves very, very quickly. It does actually huge amounts of damage, and you'll see people who are just trying to get the flank so that they can use that. It does have a decent delay of channel time, so it is possible to dodge it. It's unfortunate that the game's got a dodgeable skill shot to it, but such is life sometimes. If it does come across your lines, it will chunk like 5 of your units for half their health. It's ridiculous. I do think that this needs to be changed up, or the other vortexes need to be brought up to more like this standard, maybe. I don't really know which. Next up, you've got the Undeath Resurgent. This is his activatable ability. This is your typical undead general, plus 36 melee defense, plus 34 melee attack, plus 16 leadership. Your normal sort of general ability. Heinrich Kemmler is your upgrade of this, and he's kind of wonky in that he doesn't have access to the Nightmare or the Hellsteed. Instead, Kemmler is stuck on the ground. He has the same abilities as the other Necromancer Lord, although he's got slightly different stats. I have really no idea why you would ever take Kemmler over the regular one. He seems exactly the same as far as I've been able to tell, and he performs pretty much exactly the same. The only difference is he costs 100 points more, but I mean, like, they're identical. He's got 20 more weapon strength. What the hell is this? He's got a little bit more hit points. I mean, like, not enough that I would pay 100 points for it. Like, bleh, this is just awful. Anyway, Vampire Lord, pretty big upgrade in cost, but he's got much, much higher melee statistics. He can go on the Bard of Nightmare, the Hellsteed, or the Zombie Dragon. The Zombie Dragon does have pretty decent statistics there and gives him armor piercing. One of the nice things is it brings his weapon strength up to equal to your typical melee lord. He's not got the best melee statistics out there, but he's not actually terrible either. I think that if they had like as good a melee statistics as your typical lord, they probably would have to cost more. He's got the same necromantic spells there, but he's also got the hunger, which is his own leadership, or as long as he's not broken, he regenerates a little bit. It's a very, very slow regeneration. Next up, they've got your typical ability Foe Seeker there, but they've also got Red Fury instead of your usual other one. I can't remember what the other one's called. But this you can cast on another unit instead of yourself. It does the same thing though. And then they've got Undeath Resurgent, your typical general ability. So very, very normal stuff there. Next up, you got Manfred von Karstein for an extra 100 points. He gains, for 100 points, you get access to the Lore of Death, which is the entire Lore of Death. Like, we've been through this, we know why it's so amazing. It makes him the strongest general in the game by far. He's got very, very good statistics in melee combat. He's got access to the Zombie Dragon to make his melee statistics a little bit better, although you can stick with the Hellsteed for that speed and keep him up in the air a little bit faster. And next up, you got the heroes. You got the Necromancer. He's not the Lord Necromancer, just the regular Necromancer. He's got your typical necromancy spells. There's no particular reason to take this guy, though, because you'll have access to this lore no matter what from your Lord choice. So no point whatsoever in taking this guy. Got weak melee statistics. Next up, you got the White King. Can come on the Skeletal Steed or the Barded Skeletal Steed. I forgot to check if this guy had steeds. Yeah, he's got access to the Nightmare there. So this guy's got very, very high melee statistics, very high weapon strength for some reason. I don't know why this guy's got higher statistics than most melee hero champion types, but he does, and they're actually really, really strong because of that. They also have access to Heroic Killing Blow, plus 22% weapon damage, plus 36% armor piercing damage, giving them an additional augment above and beyond what your typical hero has. In addition to that, with their inability to actually take attrition damage from running away and then taking a bunch of damage while they run away and then getting back into the fight later and so on and so forth, these guys just take crumbling instead. The crumbling doesn't really proc on these guys all that much, and when it does, it just disintegrates their health bar very, 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 very slowly. So these guys last in fights for freaking ever. They're actually really, really tough. You'll sometimes see players just taking armies of nothing but White Kings, which is really ridiculous. Banshee is the next type. These guys have magic attacks. They ignore 75% of physical damage attacks, and they've got the slippery attribute there. I don't particularly like these guys, but they can be useful under certain circumstances. They've got very high armor piercing damage. I do think the White King is just a lot more powerful under most circumstances, so I would take the White King. It causes damage faster, and it's tanky enough that it doesn't really care. The Banshee, its 75% damage thing just doesn't really come into effect all that often, because like either you're losing because your weapon strength is so bad, your melee attack is not great, or you're winning anyway, and if that's the case, then it doesn't really matter that you're not taking as much damage. I don't know. Next up is the Vampire. They can be on the Barded Nightmare or the Hellsteed. People take them on the Hellsteed quite often. They've got access to Lore of Death, and they've got the Hunger, which is an augmentable ability they can activate on themselves. Or sorry, no, that's not the activatable one. They've got regeneration, basically. They've also got Immortal Will, which gives them the ability to activate it for a quick replenishment of health, quite a bit of it, in fact, making them very, very durable. They're not great at melee combat, in all honesty. Their statistics are not just not there. They're okay at it, but they'll lose against things like champions of other factions, and you don't want them stuck into a fight. But they do have access to the Lore of Death, which is very, very powerful, making them quite good at their job. Alright, so infantry. Zombies, very, very inexpensive. They don't do anything in particular, but they're very hard to get rid of just because of that crumbling thing and the fact that they'll never rout from a fight. Their hit point pool is very, very large, but that doesn't really matter too much since they will be crumbling almost every fight. Skeleton Warriors are a tier above that, but they're still not very good. Their statistics are kind of okay, I guess, but they take a long time to kill anything. They've got a decent amount of hit points, and they've got a very large unit size, though, making them a very good tar pit. Slightly more quality, but twice the price of zombies. The one thing that I think is quite important about them is that they've got speed of 31 as opposed to 23, and they've got a slight missile block chance, meaning that you can get into an enemy line without taking as many losses. Whereas with zombies, I tend to find that I have to sort of hold back my line for quite a while before the zombies can make it into combat, and by then I've already lost like 2 units of them. Skeleton Spearmen, next variety, they've got a bonus versus large. A little bit higher melee defense, but again, their statistics are quite bad. They'll actually lose against a lot of different types of units that they theoretically are supposed to counter just because their statistics are so bad. Their melee attack in particular is very, very poor. Crypt Ghouls, very strange unit. They've got poisonous attacks, they've got very low armor, relatively low statistics all around, but they're pretty okay at dealing damage. I think that one of their main problems is that they're 500 points. Their statistics are really, really bad, but they can still get a decent amount of work done under the right circumstances. And if you throw them in so that they can add the poison debuff, they can actually be quite effective just because that poison debuff is so powerful. Next up, you've got the Graveguard. These guys have got good armor, really good missile block chance, decent statistics all around. Their melee attack could be a little bit higher, but their melee defense is very high. Their weapon strength is very good, and they've got a +10 bonus versus infantry. These guys are very good infantry killers. And there are a lot of times where you could out-bluff something like an Empire player by taking a bunch of Graveguard as your mainline infantry, because they will cleave through a lot of infantry, and a lot of Empire players don't take the Greatswords anymore against Undead. But you could get sidelined if they take a bunch of Greatswords, and you're like, oh shit. Next up are the Karen Wraiths. These guys have been hit or miss. They've got a really okay weapon strength with high armor piercing damage. They've got relatively okay statistics, like melee attack 26 is kind of okay. Their speed's good, their leadership's okay. They've got 0 armor, but they ignore 75% of damage, which is quite a huge amount, honestly. Now, these guys are quite good at dealing with heavily armored units, and they're quite hard to get rid of right now. Especially if you're healing them up or something like that. They can be very, very sticky, and because of that, I think that they're quite effective. They are hard countered by a few magical users in the game, but there aren't enough magic attacks in the game for them to really feel too threatened. Graveguard with great weapons are one of the better anti-infantry units out there. Similar to the Empire Greatswords, they've got that +10 bonus versus infantry. They've got pretty mediocre melee attack and melee defense, though, making them quite poor in those sort of exchanges where they're fighting using those statistics. Armor and leadership are quite good, though, and of course they've got that sort of undead tenacity to stick it out through a fight until the very bitter end. Next up, you got Cavalry, Black Knights, decent non-shock cavalry. These guys pretty fast. They've got decent attack and so on and so forth, but they don't have anything too fantastic going for them. The nice thing is that they've got a relatively low price point. 700 is not that expensive for a cavalry that's relatively effective, relatively durable, relatively heavy hitting. But then you've got the Black Knights with Lances and Barding. These are your more typical shock cavalry. These are more like what people pay 900 points for, though. They've got a little bit more armor than your typical 900 point cavalry, but they're still in that realm. Pretty okay stats, but nothing fantastic. Next up are the Hex Wraiths. Very, very expensive. For some reason, they've got flaming attacks in addition to magic attacks. So they could be really good against something that's got regeneration, I guess. They've got, again, that high weapon strength that has that armor-piercing damage. But again, their statistics aren't really great. They've got that sort of physical resistance, 75% sort of thing going on again, which is still like a really good thing. It's just a really weird thing. It's so situational. Sometimes it really works well, sometimes it doesn't. Next up, you got the monsters. They've got the Fellbats. These guys are basically like a fast cavalry that you can only block if you're in the air. Very good at tying down and harassing enemy missile units, although they'll lose against a lot of them. Their statistics aren't great. They're just useful for tying up and keeping them locked down for a long period of time before they start crumbling, and once they start crumbling, they go down very quickly. Direwolves, pretty decent fast cavalry type unit. They're very, very fast. Their statistics are quite low, though, meaning that they'll usually bite the bullet fairly quickly, but if you want to harass and get around to enemy missile units, these guys are very, very good at it. Crypt Horrors, these things are currently broken. They are extremely powerful. I think that right now there's no reason to not at least take 4 of them if you're playing as the Undead. They're very inexpensive. They've got poison attacks. They've got decent statistics all around. Their regeneration helps them out immensely. They're a very, very good, solid unit. I think that right now they probably do need a bit of a nerf. Vargeist, flying unit. These things are actually a really durable, powerful flyer compared to the Fellbats, and they're good for killing enemy ranged units. They can get into the middle of an enemy ranged unit and absolutely crush them. If the enemy's boxed in, however, what's going to happen is the enemy's backline is going to collapse on them, and these things are going to get wiped out relatively quickly. Statistics still pretty good, though, all around, and they're pretty effective at what they do. They can win air fights for you as well if you're up against someone who doesn't really have good air options. Like if you're up against the Empire, taking these guys can swing an air fight against you or for you. But I find that if you're up against someone like Bretonnia, these guys get crushed. Like I played one match against a guy who took 3 of these, Manfred and a Vampire all in the air. I took like 2 Pegasus Knights, Lone Lane Corps, and a Paladin, which is, in case you didn't figure it out, a lot less than my opponent took in terms of points, and I crushed all of his units, his general and his hero. So these guys, very good against everybody except Bretonnia, basically, is the moral of that story. Next up is the Vargulf. The Vargulf is a regenerating ground-based monster. It's very, very fast at 80 for a monster. It's got decent melee attack, weapon strength, so on and so forth, and it's really actually quite effective. I like this monster quite a bit because that regeneration allows him to run in and out of fights, dealing huge amounts of damage with his high armor-piercing attacks, and then getting back out of the fight. I think it's a pretty underrepresented monster right now. Terrorgeist is the last of the monsters, and it is the flying version of it. It's got some interesting bonuses. It is poison. It does not have regeneration, though. It has very, very good attack damage. It's got a bonus versus large, which makes it effective against a lot of different units in this game. And the combination of both poison and the bonus versus large makes it effective against pretty interesting things, although I don't think that you could be cost-effective against something like, say, Demigryph Knights. You could probably fly in and really wreck up a unit if it's already otherwise engaged, especially if it's not the or if it's not the halberd ones, although everyone takes the halberd ones against undead. Black Coach is their last unit, and this is a gimmick unit. I wouldn't take it in multiplayer. It has 3 abilities here: Black Nimbus, plus 44% magic resistance, 22% missile resistance, 22% physical resistance, and it gets Strider, so it moves a bit faster. Not a particularly great ability, but let's tank out a little bit better. It's already fairly tanky. It's got the Black Sights, plus 18% charge speed, 24% speed, blah blah blah. So you would do this on a charge, and then Unholy Vigor for if you're in a melee attack. So these are not great abilities, and it's not on a great vehicle. You can use it to ram into infantry, and it can deal some damage there. But otherwise, this is just not a particularly great tool. Doesn't really do anything in particular for the undead, although it is pretty interesting. I've got to give it that. Alright, let's go ahead and try and get into a battle here. Odds of a mirror match are quite high, but that's okay. Let's just hope that we can get a decent match here. Alright, well, it says we found a match, but... Alright, so we're going vampire counts here. Manfred von Karstein. There's no particular reason not to take him over the standard Vampire Lord. It's only 100 points more, but you get a lot of versatility out of it. I'm going to go ahead and take another vampire, and we're going to put that vampire on a Hellsteed. I'm going to leave him on the Barded Nightmare on the ground. We're up against orcs, so that's going to be kind of interesting. They don't have very many aerial options, so they have to worry a little bit about that sort of thing. Now, here are my opponent dodges. Okay. There were some things that you have to worry about with Orcs and Goblins. They have got some very good anti-large units, like the big ones being all anti-large makes it quite tricky to play against. But if you sort of psych them out and make them think you're going to take lots and lots of Cryptors by playing as undead, you can then take a whole bunch of Graveguard with regular weapons, and since he'll have a bunch of big ones, you will crush the big ones with those Graveguard. But if that backfires and he ends up taking Black Orcs, you'll get crushed, so... there's kind of back and forth that goes on there. It's kind of an interesting match. I kind of like that one. Alright, Sir Dotcholiday, so it's a different guy. I'm going to switch to Vampire Counts again. Now, Vampire Counts do get dodged, I think, a little bit more than other factions because they're very, very, ridiculous right now. I don't think that they're very well balanced or very well thought out. Let's go ahead and just use zombies as our main sort of tie-up line. We're going to use 2 units of the Karen Wraiths. We're going to use 3 units of the Graveguard with great weapons. We're still going to use Cryptors, but I'm only going to use 2 units of them, I think, in this particular matchup. I'm perfectly happy leaving von Karstein on the ground. Actually, no, let's put him on a Hellsteed, and let's take the Vampirus on the Hellsteed as well. Let's go ahead and take... what do I want to do to deal with his backline stuff there, like his shooters and stuff like that? Fellbats, I'm going to take Direwolves in this one. I think that they're pretty okay. Ooh, I'm 100 points off being able to take a Vargulf. Alright, so we'll put our Vampirus on the Barded Nightmare and we'll take a Vargulf. And So this should be a fair... Oh, screw it. Let's downgrade these to Fellbats. Alright, so that frees up a few points for me. Yeah, I really like the Vargulf, actually. It's an interesting unit, so let's go ahead and Hellsteed things up a bit, and we can take 2 more units of zombies. Alright, so we got a pretty decent zombie conga line there. And we got Manfred on his Hellsteed, we got his Mistress on her Hellsteed. I was about to say Isabella, but that's actually a different von Karstein that had Isabella as a special add-on to that. Alright, so one of the things that you want to do when you're playing against somebody, especially if they pick dwarves, is to hit the ready up button and then just have your finger hovering over the return to main menu if they refuse to hit the ready up button. The reason being that some people are absolute douchebags and they will at the last minute switch factions, and if you're up against a dwarf player and then suddenly you're up against not a dwarf player, then they've got the ability to really screw over whatever your composition was, because typically you need a very dedicated anti-dwarf composition to fight them. My opponent's taken Thunderers, which is an interesting choice. I think that he does actually suspect that I'm going to take Graveguard. Although Thunderers are very inefficient against certain things, they can be quite potent. So we're going to try and use Manfred to get off a couple of spells there, in particular that Vortex, because it's a little bit bullshit against dwarves. I do wish that they would look into the spells for the undead, because their spells are just so much better than everyone else's for no good reason. Kind of wondering, like, when the Hiles show up, like, if Hiles are in this game at any point in time, what they're going to do for their magic, because they're supposed to have, like, really, really ridiculously good mages. And some of the stuff that was in high magic was really funny stuff, like destroy enemy magic weapons, or reduce the amount of magic in the area, or stuff like that. Where it's just like, I can imagine them putting it in and it being very, very frustrating to play against. Alright, so we're going to have our Wraiths on sort of the flanks there. We're going to have, even further out in the flanks, these Crypt Horrors, and we're going to have the Vargulf on our far left flank. Our Vampires clustered together over there. We'll have our Bats over on the right. Alright, so we're going to have all these guys grouped up together. We're going to have these guys soft grouped. And we're just going to start marching forward once we start this matchup. One of the nice things about this particular map is that it's got lots of sort of crags, crenellations, and lumpy bits, making it harder for my opponent to actually fire at me. So I'm going to be able to approach much more safely than I otherwise might be able to. Although I might be getting pelted by cannonballs in Manfred's big dumb face the entire time, which would be unfortunate. Cannonballs do hurt. One of the things that you tend to see that sort of bad to mediocre undead players doing from time to time is running their stuff up, their casters up, and firing off all their spells before combat starts, but you actually want to get into combat with all your units so that your passive ability there... Oh god, where is it? Curse of Undeath. Like, anytime you're casting a spell, map-wide, it replenishes health for all of your units across the entire map. So you can gain a lot of boosted hit points by engaging all of your units and then casting spells afterwards. Alright, so what are those up there? Miners with blasting charges, okay. Alright, and we'll try and get vision maybe of what's going on up there. The hell? Hello, miners with blasting charges. Now, this is an interesting engage to get into for me, because I can run in here and actually deal with those guys really, really quickly, and then my regeneration will proc. So this actually lets me deal a ton of damage to the enemy lines before they can actually respond to me. And here my Crypt Horrors have gotten in with a really good charge there. We're starting to bash into these miners quite badly. I'm going to try and tie up these other miners before they can throw those blasting charges. Looks like I'm going to be too late though. Although that's just zombies that they're going to hurt. So yeah, Crypt Horrors over here are going to absolutely trash these guys. I'm going to come in from behind with these Fellbats just for a rear charge bonus. I don't want to lose any Crypt Horrors. If I lose them, then obviously they can't return to the fight. But yeah, we still got 9. Damage tends to get spread pretty evenly amongst them, so this is going to be perfectly fine. Let's get the Karen rates up here as well. Alright, so this was an interesting choice for my opponent there. He's got 2 gyrocopters with brimstone guns back there for some reason. My opponent has no shooting, so I can actually very safely run in and assassinate my opponent's lines here with, where's that? Where's the Howling Vortex? Wind of Death. Alright, so those miners have run off the board. I can now rear charge these miners with my Crypt Horrors, and that's going to cause them to have a lot of pain very, very quickly. Oh, he does have some Quarrelers. Well, Quarrelers I'm not as worried about since they're not as high damage. Alright, and this is Wind of Death, or whatever it's called, I don't know. Yeah, Wind of Death. Now this is dodgeable. In fact, it's pretty easily dodgeable too. So it's kind of a weird thing that my opponent just sort of sat there and took it. But I guess a lot of players don't really know about it. Alright, let's go ahead and get our vampires to maybe, let's just bring our lines forward, I think. Alright, so we'll start charging forward with our lines again. I'm going to want something that can get around their back lines. I think I was going to use a Vargul for it and Felbats as well, but what have my opponents got here? 4 units of Quarrelers. The problem is that Quarrelers will actually beat my units pretty badly. I also chose poor targets here, the miners at the front. Well, actually no, killing off a bunch of hit points from them is not that bad, since it means they're less likely to throw oh, that Longbeard actually got wrecked too. Minus the blasting charges. What are these back here? Longbeards with great weapons. Hammer is in the center. I should have picked the Hammerers actually. Alright, so we'll move our zombie conga line up to the front here and have them get blown apart by mines. Alright, and these Crypt Horrors, as you can see, are basically back up to full health already. We'll have our Vargulf come around from the flank and start to oh no, wait, they've got the Dwarf Lord over there. Alright, well, I don't particularly feel like being overly charitable this match, so I'm going to go ahead and assassinate the Dwarf Lord there. Actually, no, I'm not going to use her. Since she doesn't have the passive, I'm going to go ahead and use Manfred for this. There's no reason not to. Go ahead and have our Felbats get into the fights here. Where's our other unit of Felbats? Ooh, these Crypt Horrors got wrecked because I wasn't paying attention to them. Alright, let's get our Vargulf into the fight. Let's get him fight center. Getting a lot of crumbling on this side here. Longbeards with great weapons, though, are terrible against that kind of undead. Let's get Von Karstein over here. Switch over to this. Let's go raise dead back here.
Back to unlife.
Vampire! Never rot his hide!
Alright. Crypt Horrors on the other side, still not engaged. Run them into the fight now. The other one's crumbled completely now. Let's go ahead and start augmenting my lines a bit. Augment that Felbat, just for the hell of it. Going to charge our guys into that fight over there, and we're going to go ahead and put another... Oops, shit. Shit. I did that against the wrong unit. Oh well.
Only in a life will they see.
Alright. Let's get our vampirus over here.
It shall be.
Let's aim at the right guy this time here.
Blood magic.
Vargulf is busy tearing up those front lines pretty effectively. Our zombies over here are just, I'm not really committing them to the fights because they don't actually contribute much to it.
Vampire. All life must end.
Alright, so Manfred over here, still pretty okay. Just gonna continue using those. Felbats back here, pretty much done, but that's okay, they did their job. Longbeards with great weapons are not doing that great a job at surviving this.
Find me if you dare.
Alright, we need to get one Karstein out of there. Let's get another unit of zombies up there. Get von Karstein out of the fight completely here. Get over the fight over here. Do an augment. Oh, crap, I'm gonna have to deal with these guys. Where's my other vampire?
Vampire. It is
Oh, nope,
done.
they've started to run. Alright, perfect. That wasn't that bad. Now, my opponent did have a really tough to crack through front line, but I have a lot of armor-piercing damage here. My Karen Wraiths did a very good job there, 19 kills on one, but you want to sort of go in waves so that your zombies are absorbing a lot of the hits and a lot of the damage. I accidentally let my Cryptor... Oh, wow, 81 kills. Never mind, actually. They did a really good job there. 15 on the others, but they didn't take very much damage. Vargulf, 45 kills. Pretty decent damage to him, but yeah, like these units... very, very good at cracking through the Dwarven roster. And I think that my opponent was sort of dead set on me spamming out a ton of Cryptors. I'm not sure that the Brimstone guns are actually an effective counter because you can just chase them off with your vampires. Makes them fairly easy to kill with those guys. The Hammers got 103 kills, although I think they were mostly zombies. But all in all, 123 kills in that unit of miners. Again, probably mostly zombies. So... I mean, my opponent did have some interesting units to try and counter out a vampire. I think that he was using the Quarrelers very effectively against the Cryptors, and if I had a lot of Cryptors, maybe that could have held out against that combination with the blasting charges, sort of blowing away my cover from the zombies quickly enough. Maybe that would have worked, but I somehow doubt it. But anyway, I hope that you've found this video enjoyable, and of course, as always, I hope to see you all next time.